Hello everyone. In this video we'll be talking about the Kilwa Sultanate, its origin theory, its rise, and its fall. Kilwa or Kilwa Kisiwani is an island today off the coast of modern-day Tanzania. It's speculated it was once connected to mainland Tanzania via a bridge built by the Bantu peoples, which was later removed, making it an isolated island. For thousands of years, Kilwa was an important trading port, serving as one of the main ports out of East Africa that exported African goods to the rest of the world. The history of the Kilwa Sultanate in particular, however, begins around 960 to 1000 AD, roughly 1,000 years ago. It's important to mention that the origin story of the Sultanate is not known for certain. However, there's legends and folklores that give accounts to the Sultanate's inception. Whether true or false is up for debate. The legend goes on like this. A half-Persian prince from the Shirazi region by the name of Ali ibn al-Hasan Shirazi was one of the 7 sons of the ruler of Shiraz. His mother, she was brought from Abyssinia, most likely of Bantu origin. Upon Ali's father's death, he was driven out of his inheritance by his brothers, so he was forced to flee. Setting sail out of Hormuz, the eastern side of the Persian Gulf, with some of his household members and small amount of followers, they made their way to Mogadishu, Somalia, which was the main commercial city of the East African coast. However, Ali failed to get along with the Somali elites of Mogadishu, and he was driven out of Mogadishu as well. So Ali made his way further down the East African coast with his followers until he arrived at Kilwa. It's said that the Persian prince purchased the island from its local Bantu inhabitants. However, the island was owned by the Bantu king on the mainland by the name of Al-Muli. The king agreed to sell the land to Ali in exchange for cloth that could cover the circumference of the land. As mentioned earlier, the island was connected to the mainland by a bridge. The Bantu king Al-Muli decided to go back on his agreement. Whether Ali dishonored the agreement or the king is up for debate. Nonetheless, Ali and his companions had dug up and destroyed the bridge, disconnecting it from mainland Tanzania, making Kilwa an island completely isolated from the mainland. Extensive intermarriage and conversion of local Bantu inhabitants to Islam and later Arab immigration turned Kilwa Sultanate into a unique culture which later became to be known as the Swahili culture and language. The name Swahili literally means coast dwellers. Kilwa's strategic position along the east coast made it a much more efficient East African trade center than Mogadishu. It quickly began to attract many merchants, traders, and immigrants from Arabia, Persia, and mainland Bantu peoples. In just a few years, the city was big enough to establish a satellite settlement in nearby Mafia Island. With Kilwa's successful emergence onto the trading scene, it began to challenge the dominance held by Mogadishu over the East African coast. Over time, a couple of hundred years later, Suleiman Hussein, who was the 12th ruler of Kilwa, took control of the southerly city of Sofala from the Mogadishans. Sofala is what is in now modern-day Mozambique. It's said that the name Sofala comes from the Somali language, which means go and cultivate. Sofala was the chief export of gold, ivory, and precious metals. The capture of control over Sofala for the Kilwans was very fruitful. A colossal amount of gold revenues began to fall to the Kilwa Sultans, which allowed them to finance their expansion and extend their powers all along the East African coast. At its peak of power, the Kilwa Sultanate claimed overlordship over mainland cities of Malindi, Inhambane, which is in southern Mozambique, Sofala, the port city of Mozambique, Mombasa, Pemba Island, Zanzibar, Mafia Island, Comoros, and other parts of Mozambique. These are now referred to as the Swahili coast. Kilwa also claimed ownership of trading outposts scattered across the coast of Madagascar, known then by its Arabic name of Island of the Moon. To the north, Kilwa's power was often checked by the independent Somali city-states and of course Mogadishu, the once undisputed dominant city along the East African coast, which remained Kilwa's main rival. To the south, Kilwa's reach extended as far as Cape Corrientes. Below Cape Corrientes, Kilwan merchant ships never sailed, as it was too dangerous. Like other East African sultanates, a single sultan ruled at the top of the hierarchy of the Kilwa Sultanate. The sultanate was not a centralized state. It was more of a confederation of commercial cities, each with its own internal elite, merchant communities and trade connections. The sultan might appoint a governor or an overseer, but even his authority was not cemented. In some places, for example the outposts like the island of Mozambique, its leader was the true governor in the sultan's name, whereas in more established cities like Sofala, his powers were much more limited, more like an ambassador to the city than its governor. Kilwa Sultanate was almost wholly dependent on external commerce. There was little to no agriculture within the island and its boundaries, so in order to survive, grains, meat, poultry and livestock that was needed to feed the Sultanate's inhabitants was purchased from the Bantu peoples of the mainland. Kilwa merchants made use of the market towns established by the highland Bantu peoples of modern-day Kenya, Tanzania and Mozambique to purchase these important items for their survival. The Kilwans' main trade saw them become middlemen, importing manufactured goods from Arabia and India, which was then traded in the mentioned market towns of the Bantu highlands. They did not only purchase grains and meat for their survival, but the Kilwans would also buy raw materials from the Bantus, such as gold, ivory, etc., and then sell them back to Asia. The only material that the Kilwans could grow on their island and use was that of the coconut palm tree. It was the mainstay in Kilwan life in every way, not only for its fruit. The Kilwans would use the tree for timber, thatching and weaving. The Kilwan merchants used the timber from this tree to build their merchant ships and their sails, made from coconut leaf matting, and the ships held together by coconut koya. Kilwan ships made use of the seasonal monsoon winds to sail across to India in the summer and back to Africa in the winter. The koya-sewn Kilwan ships were not seaworthy enough to brave the treacherous waters and unpredictable violent gusts around Cape Corrientes, so the entire region south of that point was rarely sailed by Kilwan merchants. Inhambane was the most southerly settlement that can be considered part of the Kilwan trading empire. The Kilwans made trade not only with Arabia and India, but also across the Indian Ocean. Coins from the Kilwa Sultanate have been found as far as the Wessel Islands in Australia, which was inhabited by the Yolungu at the time. In 1944, 9 coins were found on Makimba Island, the largest island in the Wessel Islands in the Northern Territory of Australia. 5 with Arab inscriptions were identified as being from the Kilwa Sultanate. And later, in 2018, another coin also thought to be from Kilwa was found on the beach on Elcho Island, another of the Wessel Islands. These coins today are being held in the Sydney Museum in Australia. These findings give us some sort of evidence that trade between the Kilwans and the indigenous peoples of Australia, the Yolungu, was taking place. Portuguese spy by the name of Pero, disguising himself as an Arab merchant, scouted the entire Kilwa Sultanate and reported back to Lisbon. Therefore, soon after, the Portuguese fleets of Vasco da Gama on their way to India made their stop at Kilwa Sultanate. The Portuguese marveled at the Kilwan navigational instruments, particularly their latitude staves, which they considered superior to their own. By the 1500s, the Portuguese have taken out several expeditions to dislodge the Kilwa Sultanate, managing to use the ever so effective tactic of divide and conquer. They, the Portuguese, managed to persuade the vassal states of Kilwa in Mozambique, Mombasa and Malindi to break away from the Sultanate and have the Portuguese have staging posts along the coast. During the Second Portuguese India Armada, the Portuguese tried to make a deal with the Kilwa Sultanate's Amir Ibrahim of Kilwa Island to be a puppet sultan for the Portuguese, but the Amir refused and no deal was made. So when the well-armed Fourth Portuguese Armada under Vasco da Gama made their way back again to Kilwa, they had a more conquering mood by means of violence, with the Portuguese having already secured alliances with Mozambique, Malindi and the all-important Sofala. They brought their colonizing fleet to Kilwa. Some historians say that Amir Ibrahim missed a very good opportunity in securing an alliance with the Portuguese. However, the Amir was not surrendering by any means and willed to go out as a martyr. At least one Kilwa nobleman, a certain Muhammad ibn Rukn ad-Din, known to the Portuguese by the name of Muhammad Arcone, certainly advised the Amir Ibrahim to strike up an alliance with the Portuguese. So for this suggestion of surrender by Muhammad, he was given up as a hostage to the Portuguese by the Amir Ibrahim, who then refused to ransom him back, allowing Muhammad ibn Rukn ad-Din to be subjected to the Gama's wrath. As it turns out, the vassals used the Portuguese one by one to secure their permanent break from the Sultanate. The ruler of Malindi was the first to embrace the Portuguese, forging an alliance in 1497. Next, it was not hard to persuade the ruling Sheikh Yusuf of Sofala. He signed a treaty with the Portuguese in 1502 and followed it up by allowing the construction of a Portuguese factory and fort in Sofala in 1505. It was in 1505 that invader Francisco de Almeida, under authority from de Gama, brought his fleet into the harbour of Kilwa and landed some 500 Portuguese soldiers to drive Amir Ibrahim out of the city. Almeida installed the previously mentioned Muhammad ibn Rukn ad-Din on the throne as a Portuguese vassal. Portuguese rule was not very welcome. The Portuguese completely took over the trading and banned Kilwan merchants from trading. In May 1506, Muhammad ibn Rukn ad-Din was lured and assassinated by a relative of Amir Ibrahim. However, the Portuguese kept reinstating puppet sultans and the Sultanate never recovered. The Kilwa Sultanate was officially over. From roughly the year 957 AD to 1513, Kilwa Sultanate was for centuries a thriving, bustling and important sultanate which played an important role in connecting Africa with the world and vice versa through commerce and trading. With their ambitious and adventurous drive, East African Swahili culture spread as far as Australia, leaving a mark on African history, Islamic history. Please like and subscribe to the channel, it helps with the algorithm. And please let us know what you think in the comments.